The plumber called me at 9:12 that morning. I almost ignored the call. He wasn't supposed to call me at all. I had hired him for a simple job, just to check the old pipes in the basement. Nothing urgent. Nothing complicated. But the moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. His voice was low. Careful. Like he didn't want anyone else to hear him. "Sir. I think you should come down here." I frowned. What happened? He didn't answer right away. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "There's a safe hidden behind the wall down here." For a second I thought I had misheard him. A safe? "Yes, sir." Another silence. "And there's a letter taped to it." My chest tightened. "What kind of letter?" He hesitated again. "Your sister wrote your name on the envelope." Then he read the first line. "For Daniel. If anything happens to me, this will prove it wasn't an accident." That was the moment I realized something was terribly wrong. I had never really known my sister at all. Before I continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Your support helps this channel grow. What I discovered in that basement changed everything. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 42 years old. And 3 months earlier my life had fallen apart. I was standing in the kitchen of my sister's house when the plumber said those words. A house that still didn't feel like mine. A house that still smelled faintly like her coffee and vanilla candles. 3 months earlier the police had stood in that same kitchen and told me the words that shattered everything. Your sister's death appears to be a tragic accident. They said her car lost control on a wet road. They said she hit a guardrail and rolled down an embankment. Case closed. Everyone accepted it. Everyone except me. But that morning I wasn't thinking about the accident. I was thinking about a leaking pipe in the basement. The plumber's name was Aaron Mitchell. Mid-40s. Quiet guy. Recommended by a neighbor. He had been working downstairs for about 20 minutes when he called me. "Is the pipe worse than you thought?" I asked. "No, it's not the pipe." A pause. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "There's a wall down here that shouldn't be here." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Someone built a hidden compartment." For a second I thought he was joking. My sister wasn't the kind of person who built secret rooms. Emily Carter was a school counselor. She organized charity drives. She helped struggling kids. She baked cookies for half the neighborhood. But Aaron wasn't laughing. "Sir, there's a metal box inside the wall." My pulse started to pound. "What kind of box?" "Looks like a safe." Another pause. "And there's a laptop next to it." I slowly walked toward the basement stairs. The house suddenly felt different. Quieter. Colder. Because now I knew something. My sister had hidden something in this house. Something she expected someone to find after she died. And whatever it was about to change everything. I stood at the top of the basement stairs for a moment before going down. My hand rested on the railing. My heart was beating faster than it should have. Not because of fear. Because of a thought I couldn't push away. Why would my sister hide a safe behind a wall? Emily Carter was not the kind of person who kept secrets. At least, that's what I had always believed. Emily was 3 years younger than me. I was 42. She was 39 when she died. And for most of our lives, she had been the one person I trusted more than anyone. Our parents died when Emily was 22. Car accident. A drunk driver. After that, it was just the two of us. I helped her finish college. She helped me survive the worst years of my life. We were family in the simplest possible sense. Just two people trying to hold each other together. Emily became a school counselor. Not because it paid well. It didn't. She did it because she believed kids needed someone who actually listened. She worked at Jefferson Middle School. Every Christmas she spent half her salary buying gifts for students whose parents couldn't afford them. Every summer she volunteered at a youth center downtown. Kids loved her. Teachers respected her. Parents trusted her. Emily had this strange ability to make people feel safe. Even strangers. Even people who didn't trust anyone. Which is why her death made no sense. The police called it an accident. Single vehicle crash. Late at night. Rain. They said her car lost traction on a mountain road outside the city. They said she hit a guardrail and rolled down an embankment. No other cars involved. No witnesses. Just bad luck. But something about it never sat right with me. Emily was careful. Almost annoyingly careful. She checked the weather before driving. She hated speeding. She had the safest car you could buy. And yet somehow, her car ended up at the bottom of a ravine. 3 months ago I stood in a hospital hallway while a police officer explained it all in a calm professional voice. I remember one sentence clearly. Sometimes terrible things just happen. I nodded. I signed paperwork. I planned a funeral. Because what else can you do? You bury the person you love. You accept the explanation. You try to keep living. But now I was standing in her house again. Listening to a plumber tell me he had found a hidden safe behind the wall. And a letter. A letter she had written before she died. A letter that said her death wasn't an accident. That meant one of two things. Either my sister had been paranoid. Or someone had killed her. I started walking down the basement stairs. Each step creaked under my weight. The air smelled faintly of dust and cold concrete. Halfway down I could hear Aaron moving around. Tools clinking. Metal scraping lightly against the floor. Then I heard him say something quietly. Almost to himself. Jesus. I reached the bottom step. Aaron was standing near the far wall. Part of the drywall had been removed. A rectangular section about 4 feet wide. Behind it was darkness. And a metal safe. Just like he had said. Next to it sat a closed laptop. And taped to the front of the safe was a white envelope. My name written across the front. Daniel. My stomach tightened. Aaron stepped back when he saw me. His face was pale. You weren't kidding, I said quietly. No, he replied. I really wasn't. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Aaron stood a few feet away, wiping his hands on a rag. I just stared at the envelope. My name written across it in my sister's handwriting. Emily had always written the same way. Neat. Careful. Every letter perfectly shaped. I had seen that handwriting on birthday cards. On grocery lists. On sticky notes she left around the house. But seeing it here. Taped to a hidden safe behind a wall in her basement. Made my chest feel tight. You want me to leave? Aaron asked quietly. I shook my head. No, just stay a minute. He nodded and leaned against the workbench near the furnace. I stepped closer to the wall. The hidden compartment was about 4 feet wide and maybe 3 feet deep. Just enough space for the safe and the laptop. Someone had built it carefully. The drywall edges were clean. The panel that covered it had been cut with precision. You wouldn't notice it unless you knew exactly where to look. Which meant one thing. Emily had planned this. Slowly, I peeled the envelope off the safe. The tape came loose with a soft tearing sound. For a moment I just held it in my hands. The paper felt strangely heavy. Aaron cleared his throat behind me. "Look, man," he said. "I've been doing plumbing work 20 years. I glanced back at him. "I've seen a lot of weird stuff in houses." He gestured toward the wall. "But people don't usually hide safes behind drywall unless something serious is going on." "I know. You want me to wait upstairs?" I hesitated. Then nodded. "Yeah. That might be better." Aaron didn't argue. He grabbed his toolbox and headed for the stairs. At the top he stopped. "Hey," he said. "If this is something bad, you should probably call someone." I didn't answer. Because I already knew something was wrong. Very wrong. The basement door closed. Silence returned. Just the faint hum of the furnace. I turned back to the envelope. My name stared up at me again. Daniel. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. 2 pages. Written in Emily's careful handwriting. I unfolded it. The first line made my heart skip. "Daniel, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong." I kept reading. "I hope I'm being paranoid. I hope this letter never matters. But if you're holding it, then my death probably wasn't an accident." My stomach twisted. "There are things you need to know. For the past 8 months I've been documenting something illegal. Something very dangerous." I frowned. "Illegal?" Emily barely jaywalked. "It started at the youth center where I volunteer." The words blurred for a second as my brain tried to catch up. The youth center. She talked about that place constantly. Kids from rough neighborhoods. After-school programs. Tutoring. Basketball games. She loved that place. One of the board members is involved in something terrible. I kept reading. And with every line, the picture in my mind began to change. At first I thought it was just money missing. Then I realized children were disappearing from the program. My breath caught. Disappearing? The next line made my hands go cold. Someone is using the center to move kids through the system. Quietly. Off the books. I stared at the page. My sister had been investigating human trafficking. My chest felt tight. The next paragraph was worse. I reported my concerns to the director. 2 days later someone followed me home. I looked up slowly. The basement suddenly felt colder. If you're reading this, it means they didn't stop watching. The letter ended with a single sentence written in darker ink. "The evidence is in the safe." For a long moment I didn't move. The police had told me Emily died in a random accident. But now I was standing in her basement. Holding a letter she had written before she died. A letter saying she had uncovered something dangerous. Something involving missing children. And the proof was sitting inside the safe in front of me. For a long moment I just stood there. The letter trembled slightly in my hands. My sister had been investigating something dangerous. Something involving missing kids. And she had never told me. Not once. I folded the pages slowly and slid them back into the envelope. Then I looked at the safe. It wasn't large. Maybe the size of a small microwave. Dark gray metal. Digital keypad. The kind you could buy at any hardware store. But right now it felt heavier than anything I had ever seen. Because whatever was inside, my sister believed it was worth risking her life for. I crouched down in front of it. The keypad blinked faintly. 4 empty spaces. A simple code. Which meant Emily expected someone to open it. Me. The thought made my chest tighten. My sister knew something might happen to her. She built a hidden compartment. Bought a safe. Wrote a letter. She had planned for this moment. But she never told me. Not once. Why? Why keep something like this from the only family she had? I leaned back against the concrete wall and rubbed my face. Then a memory surfaced. Something small. Something I hadn't thought about in months. 3 weeks before Emily died, we had dinner together. Just the two of us. A small Italian place she liked downtown. Halfway through the meal she asked me a strange question. "Daniel, if something ever happened to me, would you promise not to just accept it?" At the time I laughed. I thought she was joking. What kind of question is that? I said. She didn't laugh. "Just promise me." I rolled my eyes. "Fine. I promise." Then she smiled. But now I realized something. That smile had been forced. She already knew. Or at least, she suspected. I looked back at the safe. The keypad waited. 4 numbers. Emily loved simple things. Birthdays. Dates. Memories. Slowly I typed the first combination that came to mind. Our parents' anniversary. Nothing. The safe beeped once. Wrong. I tried her birthday. Wrong again. Then I stopped. Another memory surfaced. That same dinner. Emily had said something else before we left. "If anything ever happens to me, check the basement." At the time I thought she meant the water heater. Or the pipes. Something normal. Now I knew better. I stared at the keypad again. Then I typed a new number. The date our parents died. The moment that turned us into the only family we had left. The safe beeped. But this time, it unlocked. A soft metallic click echoed in the basement. My heart started pounding. Slowly. I opened the door. Inside were 3 things. A thick black folder. A flash drive. And a second envelope. This one had a single word written across it. Names. My stomach tightened. I opened the folder first. Inside were printed documents. Photos. Bank transfers. Emails. Schedules. It took less than 10 seconds for me to realize something terrifying. This wasn't just a small crime. This was a network. People with money. People with power. People connected to charities. To local government. To businesses. And every few pages, one name kept appearing again and again. A man I recognized instantly. Richard Hale. The chairman of the youth center board. A respected businessman. A donor to half the charities in the city. A man who had spoken at my sister's funeral. My hand started shaking. Because now I understood something. Emily hadn't died in a random accident. She had uncovered something that powerful people wanted hidden. And someone had made sure. She never exposed it. I sat on the cold basement floor for a long time. The folder lay open in front of me. Pages scattered around my knees. Photographs. Financial transfers. Lists of names. Some of them were children. My sister's handwriting appeared everywhere. Notes in the margins. Dates. Arrows connecting things together. Emily had turned the inside of that safe into a case file. She had been building it for months. Maybe longer. And the deeper I looked, the worse it became. At first I thought it was just money laundering. The youth center received donations. Large ones. Hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. But the financial records in the folder showed something strange. Funds were being transferred out. Not to programs. Not to supplies. But to shell companies. Companies that didn't actually exist. Emily had circled the transfers in red ink. And next to them she wrote 2 words. Follow children. I felt sick. I turned another page. There were intake forms from the youth center. Kids from difficult homes. Kids without stable families. Kids who slipped through systems easily. Several of those names were highlighted. Next to them were dates. And the word, missing. My chest tightened. Emily had written something else beside the last name. A sentence that made my stomach twist. 3 children disappeared within 6 weeks. Police reports say they ran away. But none of their friends believe it. I leaned back against the wall. My sister had discovered something terrible. Someone was using the youth center to move vulnerable kids. Quietly. Without anyone noticing. And the man running the board of that center was Richard Hale. I flipped to another page. A photograph slid out and landed on the floor. I picked it up. It showed a parking lot. Nighttime. A black SUV. Standing beside it was Richard Hale. But he wasn't alone. He was talking to someone. A man I didn't recognize. Emily had written a note underneath the photo. Meeting behind community center. 11:43 p.m. Vehicle registered to Hale Holdings. Another page. More photographs. Another meeting. Another exchange. And then. The final page in the folder. A printed article. A news story from 2 years earlier. The headline read. Local businessman donates $2 million to youth programs. Underneath the headline was a smiling photo of Richard Hale. Standing next to my sister. Emily had been the program coordinator. She helped run events. She organized activities. She worked directly with the kids. Which meant something terrible. Emily wasn't investigating from a distance. She was inside the system. She was seeing things firsthand. And Richard Hale must have realized that eventually. I opened the second envelope. The one labeled names. Inside was a list. 22 people. Some were business owners. Some were politicians. Some were employees at the youth center. And beside 3 of those names, Emily had written one word. Dangerous. At the very top of the list was Richard Hale. My phone buzzed suddenly. The sound made me jump. Aaron. The plumber. I answered. Yeah. Everything okay down there? I looked at the documents around me. The evidence my sister had hidden. The proof that powerful people were involved in something evil. No, I said quietly. Not even close. Aaron hesitated. Look, man, if this is serious, you should probably call the police. I stared at the name at the top of the list. Richard Hale. The same man who had stood beside me at Emily's funeral. The same man who put a hand on my shoulder and said he was sorry for my loss. Then I remembered something else. Something I hadn't noticed at the time. One of the police officers at the crash scene had shaken his hand. Like they knew each other. Like they were friends. I swallowed slowly. No, I said. I'm not calling the police. Because suddenly I understood something. If Emily had been killed for discovering this, then the people involved were powerful. Powerful enough to make her death look like an accident. And if I wanted the truth, I was going to have to be very careful. Very quiet. And very patient. I stayed in the basement another hour. Reading. Rereading. Trying to understand the scale of what my sister had uncovered. The deeper I went into the documents, the clearer one thing became. Emily had been getting closer to exposing them. Too close. There were emails printed in the folder. Messages between board members. Financial transfers between shell companies. And several surveillance photos Emily must have taken herself. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same man. Richard Hale. But there was something else that kept bothering me. A memory I couldn't ignore. Richard Hale had attended Emily's funeral. Not just attended. He had helped organize it. I could still see the moment clearly. The church had been full. Teachers. Parents. Students from the youth center. Everyone crying. Everyone saying the same thing. Emily was such a good person. I had barely been able to stand. Grief had turned everything into fog. And then Richard Hale walked up to me. Tall. Well-dressed. Calm. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Daniel." His voice had been steady. Comforting. Emily was one of the best people I've ever known. At the time I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He had donated millions to the youth center. He was respected across the city. A philanthropist. A community leader. But now I was staring at documents that said something very different. Emily believed he was running a trafficking network. Using charity programs to move vulnerable kids. The thought made my stomach twist. I packed the documents back into the folder carefully. Then I put the flash drive in my pocket. I wasn't stupid. If someone had killed Emily for this. The last thing I wanted was to leave all the evidence sitting in a basement safe. I closed the safe. Then I slid the drywall panel loosely back over the opening. Anyone walking down here wouldn't notice anything unusual. At least not right away. When I went upstairs, Aaron was waiting in the kitchen. He looked at me the way people look at someone who has just received bad news. "You okay?" "No." I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water. My hands were still shaking. Aaron watched me quietly. Finally he spoke again. "So, what was in the safe?" I hesitated. Then I told him the safest version of the truth. My sister thought someone might hurt her. Aaron frowned. "Hurt her how?" "She believed she was investigating something illegal." His eyes widened. "Like what?" I shook my head. "The less you know, the better." He didn't push. Smart man. Instead he nodded slowly. "Look. I'm not the kind of guy who asks questions I shouldn't. I appreciate that." I took out my wallet and pulled out several $100s. More than the repair was worth. He stared at the money. "You don't have to. Take it." He accepted it slowly. Then he said something that surprised me. "You know, when I was downstairs earlier." He hesitated. I had the weirdest feeling. What kind of feeling? Like someone had been watching that house. The word sent a chill through me. "When?" "Couple weeks ago. I drove past while working on another house in the neighborhood. And there was a black SUV parked across the street." My pulse quickened. "Did you see the driver?" Aaron shook his head. Windows were tinted. I didn't say anything. Because suddenly I remembered something else. 2 nights after Emily's funeral. I had noticed the same thing. A black SUV sitting on the corner near her house. At the time I assumed it belonged to a neighbor. Now I wasn't so sure. Aaron grabbed his toolbox. "You going to the police?" "No." He studied my face for a moment. Then he nodded. "Whatever this is, be careful." "I will." He walked to the door. But before leaving he turned back. "Your sister must have been brave." I looked toward the basement door. Toward the hidden safe. Toward the evidence she had risked everything to collect. "Yeah," I said quietly. "She really was." The front door closed behind him. And for the first time since opening that safe, I realized something else. If the people who killed Emily knew about the evidence, they might already be watching me too. I didn't go to the police. Not that day. Not the next day either. Instead, I did something else. I stayed quiet. Very quiet. The kind of quiet that makes people believe you're harmless. The kind of quiet that makes dangerous people stop paying attention to you. Because the more I thought about Emily's letter, the more one thing became clear. She hadn't gone to the police either. That meant she didn't trust them. And if she didn't trust them, there was probably a reason. So I started small. First, I made copies of everything. Every document. Every photo. Every file on the flash drive. I used 3 different laptops. 2 different cloud accounts. And a hard drive I kept locked in my office at work. Then I did something Emily would have approved of. I started researching. Richard Hale looked perfect on paper. Founder of Hale Holdings. Donor to hospitals. Sponsor of youth sports programs. His name appeared on plaques across the city. Libraries. Scholarships. Charity galas. If you searched him online, you found nothing but praise. But money leaves trails. And I worked in financial consulting long enough to know where to look. Over the next 2 weeks, I started digging. Corporate records. Property filings. Business partnerships. And slowly, pieces started lining up. Hale Holdings had dozens of shell companies. Most of them tied to logistics firms. Transportation. Warehousing. Shipping. The kind of businesses that move things quietly. Or people. The youth center was just the front. A place to identify vulnerable kids. Kids with unstable homes. Kids who wouldn't immediately be reported missing. Emily had figured that out. And it had gotten her killed. The next step was harder. Because information alone wasn't enough. I needed proof. The kind that would destroy someone like Richard Hale. So I started watching him. Carefully. From a distance. His routine was predictable. Monday mornings at the Hale Foundation office. Wednesday afternoons at the youth center. Friday evenings at charity events. And every Tuesday night. He went somewhere interesting. A private warehouse near the river. It wasn't listed under his name. But the property records told a different story. The building belonged to one of his shell companies. On the 3rd Tuesday night, I followed him. Not closely. Just far enough back to stay invisible. His black SUV turned into the warehouse parking lot around 10:40 p.m. 2 other vehicles were already there. I parked half a block away. Waited. And watched. For nearly an hour. Then something happened. The warehouse door opened. A van backed up to the loading dock. 3 men stepped out. One of them was Richard Hale. Even from the distance I recognized him. Tall. Confident. Like he owned the world. The van doors opened. My stomach dropped. Because inside the van were 2 teenage boys. Hands tied. Terrified. The men pulled them out quickly. One of the boys tried to run. Richard Hale grabbed him by the collar. Dragged him back. And punched him in the stomach. The boy collapsed. That was the moment everything inside me changed. This wasn't just about my sister anymore. This was about those kids. About every kid Emily had tried to protect. And about the man who thought he could get away with destroying lives. I took out my phone. Started recording. Every second. Every face. Every vehicle. Every license plate. I stayed hidden in the dark. Silent. Patient. The way Emily must have been. Because revenge doesn't need noise. It needs evidence. And by the time Richard Hale finally closed the warehouse doors that night, I had the first piece of proof that would destroy him. That night changed everything. Until then, I only had my sister's evidence. Documents. Photos. Financial records. All powerful. But still something a good lawyer could try to discredit. Now I had something different. Video. Real footage. Richard Hale standing in a warehouse parking lot. Dragging a terrified teenager out of a van. Punching him in the stomach. And forcing him inside. I watched the recording 3 times when I got home. Every detail mattered. Every second. The license plates were clear. The warehouse address was visible. Even Hale's face appeared under the security light. Calm. Cold. Like hurting a child meant nothing to him. I saved the file in 4 different places. 2 cloud backups. An external drive. And the flash drive Emily had left in the safe. Then I sat in my living room in the dark. Thinking. Because revenge wasn't the goal. Emily didn't want revenge. She wanted justice. But justice requires something very specific. Proof. And now I had the beginning of it. Over the next 3 weeks I followed Hale's routine carefully. Never too close. Never too obvious. Every Tuesday night he visited that warehouse. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with 2 or 3 other men. Every time. A van arrived. Sometimes there were kids inside. Sometimes there weren't. But something was always being moved. Boxes. Envelopes. Money. And occasionally. People. I documented everything. Photos. Videos. License plates. Dates and times. By the 4th week I had something Emily probably never managed to capture. A full exchange. The warehouse doors opened. A van backed up to the dock. 3 kids stepped out. 2 girls. 1 boy. All terrified. And Richard Hale personally handed a thick envelope of cash to the driver. I recorded the entire thing. The faces. The transaction. The children being pushed inside. It was enough to destroy him. But something else happened that night. Something unexpected. As Hale walked back toward his SUV, he stopped. Turned. And looked directly at my car. Even from across the street. I could feel it. That moment when someone realizes something isn't right. My heart started pounding. I stayed perfectly still. Lights off. Breathing slow. Hale stared for a long 5 seconds. Then he got into his SUV and drove away. I waited another 10 minutes before moving. My hands were shaking when I started the engine. For the first time since opening that safe. Fear hit me. Real fear. Because if Hale suspected someone was watching him, he wouldn't wait long to find out who. And people like Richard Hale didn't ask questions twice. When I got home that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep collecting evidence forever. I had enough. More than enough. The next step had to be bigger. Bigger than the police. Bigger than local authorities. Because if Hale had connections inside the city, then the only people who could stop him were the ones he couldn't control. Federal investigators. The FBI. But before I could bring them in, I needed one last thing. Insurance. Something that would guarantee Hale couldn't silence me. The way he silenced my sister. And that meant making sure the truth would come out. Even if something happened to me. The next morning I started preparing. Not emotionally. Strategically. Emily had already shown me how dangerous Richard Hale was. She had collected evidence for months. And it got her killed. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. The first thing I did was create a dead man's switch. A simple system. 5 encrypted folders. 5 different people. Each folder contained the same files. The videos from the warehouse. The documents Emily collected. The financial records. The list of names. And one scheduled email. If something happened to me. If my phone stopped checking in every 24 hours. Those files would automatically be sent to journalists. Federal investigators. And every major news outlet in the country. Once that was done, I made the call. Not to the local police. Not to anyone in the city. I contacted a federal human trafficking task force. It took 3 days before they agreed to meet. We sat in a quiet federal office 2 hours outside the city. 2 agents. Both calm. Both careful. I placed the flash drive on the table. This belonged to my sister, I told them. She died 3 months ago. They exchanged a look. Car accident, one of them said. Yes. Then I slid my phone across the table. The warehouse video started playing. The room became silent. One of the agents leaned forward. Is that Richard Hale? Yes. The second agent rewound the video. Watched the moment Hale punched the boy. Watched the van doors open. Watched the children being forced inside. Then he looked up at me. How long have you had this? About 4 weeks. And the other evidence? I handed them the folder. Everything Emily had built. Everything I had added. Photos. Transactions. Locations. Vehicle registrations. 30 minutes later the room felt completely different. The agents weren't skeptical anymore. They were focused. Because the case was bigger than they expected. Much bigger. Richard Hale wasn't just trafficking kids through one youth center. He was connected to a network operating across 3 states. The warehouse I filmed. Just one location. By the end of the meeting one of the agents said something quietly. You did the right thing coming to us. I shook my head. My sister did the right thing. 3 weeks later. Everything collapsed for Richard Hale. It happened fast. Faster than I expected. Federal agents raided the warehouse first. Then 3 offices connected to Hale Holdings. Then the youth center itself. 17 arrests in one night. 8 victims recovered. Dozens of computers seized. The news exploded the next morning. Every channel. Every newspaper. Every website. The headlines were everywhere. Philanthropist arrested in human trafficking ring. The photo they used showed Richard Hale being led out of his office in handcuffs. For the first time. He didn't look powerful. He looked small. Terrified. The trial lasted months. But the outcome was never in doubt. Emily's evidence. My recordings. The rescued victims. It was overwhelming. Richard Hale was convicted on every charge. Human trafficking. Kidnapping. Organized crime. And something else. Something that brought the entire story full circle. During the investigation. Federal forensic teams re-examined Emily's car. The accident report. The brake system. And they found something the local police had somehow missed. The brake line had been cut. Not worn. Not damaged. Cut. Deliberately. That discovery added one final charge. First-degree murder. The murder of my sister. The verdict took less than 4 hours. 4 hours for the jury to decide the fate of a man who had destroyed lives for years. Richard Hale sat perfectly still when the decision was read. Guilty. On every charge. Human trafficking. Kidnapping. Organized crime. And the murder of my sister. For the first time since the trial began, he turned and looked directly at me. His expression was strange. Not angry. Not afraid. Just empty. Like a man who finally understood the game was over. The judge sentenced him to life in prison. No possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent when the sentence was announced. Then someone in the back began to cry. One of the parents of the rescued children. I didn't say anything. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. Because justice doesn't feel like victory. It feels like something heavy finally being set down. After the trial I went back to Emily's house. The basement looked the same. Concrete walls. The old furnace humming quietly. The place where the hidden compartment used to be was sealed again. Drywall. Paint. Nothing visible anymore. But I knew it was there. The place where my sister had hidden the truth. The place where everything had started. I stood there for a long time. Thinking about her. Emily had known the risk. She had known someone might kill her. And she had kept going anyway. Because some people can't look away when they see something wrong. Even when it's dangerous. Even when it costs them everything. The youth center reopened a year later. New leadership. New staff. Real oversight. A scholarship program was created in Emily's name. For kids who needed someone to believe in them. The kind of kids she spent her life helping. Sometimes I still visit the center. Not often. But enough to see something that reminds me why she did what she did. Kids laughing. Playing basketball. Arguing over homework. Living normal lives. Lives that might have disappeared if Emily had stayed silent. The world will never know everything she did. Most of her work stayed buried in that safe. But the truth came out. And the man who killed her will spend the rest of his life behind bars. That's enough. Sometimes people ask me if I ever felt afraid while exposing Richard Hale. The answer is simple. Yes. But fear doesn't matter when the truth is standing right in front of you. Someone just has to be willing to carry it. My sister carried it first. And when she couldn't anymore, I finished what she started. Thank you for listening. Calm justice doesn't shout. It keeps records.